9,000 people died in one night. More than the Titanic, more than the Lusitania, more than any shipwreck in human history, and the world forgot about it. January 30th, 1945, the Baltic Sea, freezing water, war all around. The Wilhelm Gustloff, carrying over 10,000 refugees, was torpedoed by a Soviet submarine. In just 40 minutes, the ship sank, taking 9,000 souls to the bottom of the sea. This is the deadliest maritime disaster in history. To understand this tragedy, we must go back to 1945. World War II, in its final months, the Soviet army advancing from the east. Millions of Germans fleeing, terrified of Soviet revenge. The Wilhelm Gustloff was never meant to be a refugee. Built in 1937, she was a cruise liner, a symbol of Nazi pride, luxury, comfort, and propaganda. But by January 1945, she became a floating coffin. Her mission: Operation Hannibal, the largest naval evacuation in history. Get German civilians and soldiers out before the Soviets capture them. On January 30th, the Gustloff left Gdynia, Poland. Destination: Germany. Officially, she could carry 1,400 people, but that night, over 10,000 souls crowded onto her decks. Women, children, elderly, wounded soldiers, all desperate to escape the war. They had no idea. They were sailing into a nightmare. Imagine the scene. 10,000 people, crammed into a ship built for 1,400, families sleeping in hallways, children on the floor, wounded soldiers in pain. No life jackets for everyone. Not enough. Lifeboats, chaos, fear, desperation. Among them, a pregnant woman, about to give birth, a 10-year-old boy, separated from his parents, elderly grandparents, too weak to stand. They paid for their tickets with their last marks, or they simply begged for a place. The ship was so overcrowded, people stood on deck, freezing in the January cold. Temperature, -18 degrees Celsius. The Baltic Sea, already starting to freeze. Captain Friedrich Petersen, an experienced officer, he knew the risks Soviet submarines in these waters, but he had his orders: get them to Germany or die trying. At 12:30 p.m., the Wilhelm Gustloff departed, escorted by only one torpedo boat, the Lova. 10,000 lives sailing into history's deadliest maritime disaster. 4 p.m., darkness falls, the Baltic Sea, calm, but deadly cold. On board, celebration. Some passengers, relieved to be escaping the war zone, others, terrified of what's to come. Then, at 9:16 p.m., disaster strikes. The Soviet submarine S-13, commanded by Captain Alexander Marinesko. He spotted the Gustloff through his periscope, a massive target, overcrowded, slow-moving. He didn't know, or didn't care, that it was mostly civilians. Marinesko gave the order, fire. 3 torpedoes launched, speeding through the dark water. First torpedo, hit, right in the bow, explosion, fire, screaming, second. Torpedo, hit, near the swimming pool, water, rushing in. Third torpedo, hit, the engine room, power lost. In seconds, the luxury liner became a death trap. Lights went out, panic erupted, people running, falling, crushing each other. The ship, listing to one side, lifeboats, impossible to launch. The cold water, already flooding the decks. Captain Marinesko fired one more torpedo. It missed, but the damage was done. The Wilhelm Gustloff had 40 minutes to live. Chaos, absolute chaos. 10,000 people, trapped, darkness everywhere, screams, cries, prayers, mothers, searching for children, children calling for mothers, the wounded left behind, the ship tilted. More and more. People slid across the decks, into the freezing water. Those who jumped faced hell. Water temperature near freezing, hypothermia, within minutes. Clothes heavy with water, dragging them down. Some clung to debris, others held onto each other. Many simply sank. The lifeboats, only a fraction could be launched. Most smashed against the hull as the ship rolled. A survivor described it. People were drowning, screaming, dying all around. Me. The water was black, filled with bodies. I could step on them to stay afloat. It was hell. Absolute hell. At 9:50 p.m., just 34 minutes after the first torpedo, the Wilhelm Gustloff disappeared beneath. The waves, 10,000 people, went into the water. Only around 1,200 were rescued. 9,000 souls lost forever. The youngest victim, a newborn baby. The oldest, a 78-year-old grandmother. Most, women and children. The torpedo boat low returned, picked up survivors from the water, but it was too late. For thousands bodies, floating everywhere, frozen, silent, forever at peace. The next morning, January 31st, 1945, news spread. But quietly Nazi propaganda tried to hide the scale. They couldn't admit 9,000 civilians died, official report, heavy losses, but necessary for the war effort. Captain Marinesco was praised by the Soviets, a hero, for sinking an enemy ship. He never knew, or never admitted, it was mostly refugees. The truth, buried for decades. After the war, Germany defeated, the Gustloff forgotten, a tragedy. No one wanted to remember. The survivors scattered across the world, too traumatized to speak, too ashamed to tell their story. For 60 years, the Wilhelm Gustloff remained the deadliest maritime disaster in history, more than Titanic, by 6 times more than Lusitania, by 7 times more than Estonia, by 10 times, and yet almost no one knows about it. Why? Because they were Germans, fleeing a war. Their country started, because the victors write the history, because some tragedies are too painful to remember. 9,000 deaths, not soldiers, but civilians, not enemies, but refugees, not warriors, but women and children. The Wilhelm Gustloff reminds us of a terrible truth. In war, there are no winners, only victims. Those 9,000 souls didn't die for glory. They died trying to survive, trying to escape, trying to live. Today, their bodies rest at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. The wreck, a war grave, protected by law. Disturbing it is forbidden. Divers who visited report, it's silent down there, peaceful, but you can feel the tragedy. We remember them, not as Germans, not as enemies, but as human beings. Mothers, fathers, children, dreams, hopes, lives, all lost in one night. The Wilhelm Gustloff must never be forgotten. 9,000 lives lost, 1,200 survivors, one tragedy the world forgot. If this story moved you, share it. Let's keep their memory alive. Subscribe to Dark History Files for more forgotten tragedies. Rest in peace, victims of the Wilhelm Gustloff. We remember you.